Well, again, thank you for everyone for joining tonight's webinar on new transfer student housing at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. We're going to go ahead and get started with our presentation and use everyone's time wisely, but I appreciate you all hopping on Zoom tonight. My name is Dan Wright. I work for Michigan Housing, and I am here to present to you all about our housing options for new undergraduate transfer students here. A couple housekeeping notes. You'll see a Q&A section in this Zoom webinar. You're welcome to ask questions as we go along. I am a one-man show tonight, so I will do my best to keep an eye on the questions that are coming in and answer them if they're relevant to what I'm speaking about in this moment. Otherwise, there will be time at the end, and I will be able to do my best to answer as many questions as I possibly can. So I encourage you to ask them, but hopefully I answer many of them before you even have to ask. So you're here tonight to learn a little bit about on-campus housing for new transfer students joining the university this upcoming academic year. And I'm excited to present you all with a fair amount of information about our housing options, how on-campus housing works at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, walk you through some of the steps of the process and so on and so forth. There's a roadmap. Like I said, going to talk about our housing options. We're going to talk about our living learning communities, what it means to live in community here in a residence halls here in Ann Arbor. Talk about some additional living options to meet specialized needs, talk a little bit about what it means to apply for housing, then finally finish off with our vaccination requirement before I take questions. Similar housekeeping note, this webinar will be recorded, is being recorded right now, and will be posted to the Michigan Housing website sometime next week. So again, if you want to come back and find this information again, you'll be able to do so by watching this recording later on. So let's talk about housing at Michigan for new transfer students. I want to talk about those that are really starting their University of Michigan journey in this upcoming fall or this upcoming spring or summer, knowing that some students do join us between May and August. A couple of things to note, University of Michigan does not require any undergraduate students to live on campus. There's no residency requirement. No student, no matter what year or how many credits they may come into the university with, is required to live on campus. It's entirely optional. One thing I will note, and if you're here, maybe you got the link to our webinar, might have gotten a message that came from me to our incoming transfer student class, is that Michigan Housing anticipates having on-campus housing for all new transfer students who desire to live on campus. That hasn't always been the case historically, so if you may have heard things from friends or family, beliefs that on-campus housing is really not available for new transfer students, I'm here to break that myth, that we do have housing, and we believe that every single new transfer student that would like to live on campus will have the opportunity to do so and will be offered a space if they apply. Again, without a residency requirement, wanted to note there's no commitment. There's no obligation to live on campus, even going through all the way through the process until you sign a housing contract for a space. And I'll talk about what that means as we get towards the end. But it's important to note you can get all the way through the process, 99% of the way done, but until you get to that last step, you're not locked into living on campus in one of the Michigan residence halls. Michigan Housing does not charge any sort of housing deposit or application fee. So there's nothing you have to pay to the university in order to apply to live on campus or to sign your housing contract. But I will note, if you're exploring the opportunity to live on campus, just note that all undergraduate students that live on campus are required to have a meal plan through the university. And we have all of our residential meal plans provide for some level of unlimited meals in the residential dining halls. You pick one of those meal plans when you sign your housing contract, but just know that is a requirement in order to live on campus. So let's talk about where housing is available for new transfer students. So we have two campuses here in Ann Arbor that are open and available for new transfer students and undergraduate students in general to live at. Our North Campus, where we have a couple of residential communities, our Central Campus, where we also have a few here too. I've listed out some particular residence halls or residential communities here specifically, and I really wanted to highlight those because Michigan Housing works really hard to really start to match up the needs of our incoming transfer student population with the types of space available. I recognize that many of our students coming in as new transfer students have lived on campus before, are familiar with what it means to live in a residential community. And so we typically try to pick particular communities that might have more older students, returning students here in Michigan, rather than brand new first year students in their first year of college. The types of rooms that we set aside tend to have a little bit more space and a little bit more privacy. And again, maybe have less people assigned to them, or again, are just larger overall. And we intentionally do that, honoring, again, the fact that many of our students have lived on campus before before at other universities or are familiar and again, aren't always looking for some of the detailed pieces of a residential community that sometimes first year students are. And so really geared towards those communities to really create bigger pockets of transfer students, living with other transfer student roommates or living in communities with older students, again, that you may share classes with, again, maybe farther along in your college journey than someone who's brand new to college. So I'm just noting some of those communities here. Again, particularly on Central Campus, Wolverine Village, or Stockwell Hall, which is where our transfer year experience community is at, and I'll talk about that in a second. Or North Quad or Fletcher Hall. I encourage you to do your research, learn a little bit more about them. Those are the types of places that our incoming transfer student class is likely to be assigned based on their interests. But again, we have plenty of spaces and many spaces available on North Campus for those that are interested in that. So really encourage you to do a little bit of your research, learn a little bit about our residential campuses. I also want to note that many transfer students that might participate in Michigan learning communities, which again, we'll talk about that here in a second, may live in some other locations here. We do have some communities that do recruit and admit new transfer students into those specific academic residential living learning programs. One thing I do want to highlight, and I'm going to talk about Wolverine Village, is if you haven't heard, the University of Michigan is opening 5 new residence halls this upcoming August. And we anticipate there'll be a sizable number of new transfer students that will have the opportunity to live there, to be the first students to ever live in these residence halls here at the University of Michigan. So I wanted to highlight that. You may look and find information out there. You may know or heard of this type of residence hall from other friends or family members or others around. There's not a lot of information out there because it's still being constructed, hence why I showed you a bit of a rendering here on the screen. I can't show you what it looks like directly because it's a lot of dirt right now. It's still under construction, but opening up in August, and many of you here, if you apply to live on campus, may be some of the first students to ever live in these residence halls this upcoming August. So let's talk a little bit of the types of residence hall rooms that we have here at the University of Michigan. And like I said, some of these things are, I want to highlight the overall numbers, but really want to gear this and talk a little bit about, where you might see distinctions for new transfer students versus other undergraduate students here on campus at Michigan. I would say the majority of students here at the University of Michigan live in doubles. That's just the majority of what we have. 2 people in a room or a bedroom. Again, I talked a little bit about here on some of the things you would see, like a lot of it is geared towards first year students. Where we gear a lot for transfer students is things around suites. You'll see a lot of suites in which you may share a bedroom, but maybe in a broader suite for a student, in which you may have a type of, again, shared bathroom or again, private bathroom. But many students do live in the types of rooms and rooms and bedrooms in which there might be community bathrooms as well. And those actually come with a little bit of a lower price and a lower cost. So again, just know we have a wide variety and you'll have an opportunity to kind of express a preference as you go through the application process. Similar here around our residence halls, wanted to highlight we have a wide variety from smaller residence halls that will have 70 to 80 students in them to larger ones that might have 12 to 1,300 residents. So again, those types of things that are available for new transfer students. Same thing, air conditioning. If you're familiar at all with the weather in Southeast Michigan, there are some months out of the year in which it can be nice, can be comfortable to have air conditioning. But again, there's many months of the academic year, again, from August to May, in which air conditioning in order to really thrive is not always necessary. And it just depends on someone's needs. And I'll talk a little bit about specialized needs if you may have them a little bit later on. But again, many of our students just know we have some residence halls that have air conditioning, some that might have window air conditioners, and some that might not have any air conditioning at all. Similarly, around elevators, we do have smaller story residence halls that might have stairs only, and then many others, some of our taller buildings that have one or more elevators. Thinking similarly about specialized needs, we do have some all-female residence halls on campus. We also have some halls that have dining halls like on the ground floor. One thing to note about our residential meal plans is that you can eat at any of the residential dining halls, no matter where you live. Again, if you have a residential meal plan, you can eat at any of them. So again, you don't have to only eat in the one that you live in or eat in the one that's nearby. Obviously, there's more convenience to eating a lot of your meals closer to where you live or maybe closer to where your classes are at. But all students that live on campus have access to all of the residential dining halls. One thing I will note is at the University of Michigan, we do not provide fridges and microwaves in rooms. So there would be an expectation that students, if they would like to have a fridge or a microwave, can bring their own. We do partner with a company called College Products, in which you're permitted to rent through them, or you can rent through any company of your own that you would like. But the nice part is if you do rent through the partnership that we have with College Products, you will have an opportunity in which your fridge or microwave combination would be delivered to your room prior to your arrival. So again, you are responsible. You're welcome to bring your own if you would like to have that with you. But just know the universe does not provide fridges or microwaves inside of rooms. One thing I do want to highlight a little bit is about kind of what comes in a room, furniture. So sharing here a couple of example photos of which our furniture in our Michigan residence hall rooms is modular. What it means is really you can customize it to what you want to, from a bed on the floor to a full loft configuration to bunking beds if you really, really like to save space with a roommate. What we find is many students do some version, you actually don't see it here in a photo, of what we call a half loft, in which there's clearance space underneath the bed. But again, the bed itself becomes up to kind of a height in which, you don't necessarily have to climb up a ladder to get up top. But our furniture is meant to be configurable and modular. Again, so you can kind of show you an example of what comes with this, from a twin XL bed to a desk and a dresser, and again, in a fully kind of customizable configuration there too. Actually, the partnership that we have with the company College Products, they also provide lofting services. So if you had a configuration that you would want before you move in, and you rent a fridge or microwave with them, you can also rent, or again kind of pay for the service, and they'll come in and actually loft your bed for you before you arrive to campus if you'd like. So, talked a little bit about our housing options. Let's talk about our living learning programs that we have. We have two types of living learning programs here in Michigan Housing, both of which have options available to new transfer students. The first of which is our Michigan Learning Communities, and the second of which is our Housing Theme Communities. And you may ask yourself, well, what's the difference between those two? And there are some distinctions. So our Michigan Learning Communities, typically academic based. You'll notice here, you'll see the logo kind of tied into our Michigan Learning Communities, and I'm going to kind of circle it here, LS&A. One thing I do want to note is that it's not limited to only students in the LS&A college. Just note that students from among any college can participate in a Michigan Learning Community, and I'll talk a little bit more about some of those programs here in a second. But our Michigan Learning Communities, like I said, usually 80 to 100 students in a program in a given year. Some of them are a little bit more geared towards first-year students and returning students, and some of them do accept new transfer students. It can be a really great opportunity to make connections, make friends, spend time both inside of the residence halls and inside of the classrooms and around campus with peers as you acclimate yourself to the Michigan community. Students will often take classes with other students, like I said, in addition to attending weekly events, and there's a lot of academic support, so faculty and staff that help support those programs. Our housing theme communities are a little bit more interest and experience based. They end up typically, for the majority of them that we have, are about 30 to 40 students per program. And again, there's kind of event based and interest based. So there are theme specific events, communities that happen. And I'm going to talk about those first. And then we have one specific housing theme community for transfer students and exclusively made up of new transfer students, and that is the Transfer Year Experience community. That is about 50 students large, lives in Stockwell Hall, one of our residence halls. And again, is geared entirely of new transfer students, geared towards programming and events and other things happening for, again, a group of 50 transfer students who are all experiencing their not their first year in college, but their first year at Michigan. And again, being around and being on the same floor and surrounded by peers going through that similar experience. Among our Michigan learning communities, I'll note a couple of them here in which students, again, may have already been admitted to them. So I'll talk about our honors program. Our honors program has a dedicated honors housing for those that are interested in that, and there is space for new transfer students that have joined the honors program to live in that community. It's not required. Honor students don't have to live in the honors housing community. They can live anywhere they want to, but it is an option available to them. Similarly, if anyone here as a new transfer student is admitted to the residential college, there's an opportunity to live in the residential college community as well. But I do want to highlight the two that again open up to more than just students in LS&A, and that is our Michigan Sustainability Community and our Lloyd Scholars for Writing the Arts. Those are open, and there's opportunities to apply for those. If those sound interesting to you, I encourage you to take a look, do some research, learn a little bit about them. And most importantly to know, you can apply to them when you apply for on-campus housing. So when you submit a housing application, you'll see opportunities to apply to these communities. These communities have essay questions associated with them, so things you can go ahead and have to work through an essay on and fill out an essay. And then there's an application review process after all of the housing applications are due. You can apply for up to two of the Michigan learning communities and apply for the transfer year experience all at the same time. Just noting that, if someone is admitted to a Michigan learning community, that'll kind of take priority over that transfer year experience community. But if you're interested now, the essay questions are available online right now, or if you've started to go through the housing application, they're in there too for you to start working on those essays if any of these programs sound of interest to you. So let's talk about living in community. And again, for many of you that maybe you've lived on campus before in a residence hall at another university, this won't seem new. Many of the support and resources and opportunities available to University of Michigan Ann Arbor students are similar to what you may find at other universities, and the types of support that we provide to help undergraduate students thrive in their first year at Ann Arbor. So important to note, living with a roommate is a factor of this. Some transfer students, you may share a room or a bedroom with a peer, so something to be aware of. There's opportunities there. Again, I always like to say, and again, may feel familiar for those that have had roommates before, no roommates will be a perfect match on every aspect of living in a residence hall. We'll ask you some questions about what it means, what things are really important to you. When you fill out your housing application, it'll be like, what time do you go to sleep? Or what's the temperature you really like in your room? So it's really important to think about for you, what are the things most important to you? These are the things that might be really hard to compromise on. And then on the flip side, think about things that they might feel more like preferences, the things in which you could compromise on them. I know for me, I don't think I could compromise on temperature of a room. I like my room nice and cold. Living in Southeast Michigan has been nice in that it is cold here some of the months of the year, and so I can get a nice cold room and a cold bedroom. I don't think I could work with a really hot room. It's just my own preference and would be really hard to compromise on. But things around sharing items with my roommates or what time we go to sleep. I'm a deep sleeper, so if my roommate was up for a little bit later, I could probably work with that as long as they weren't too noisy. So those are the things to really think about as you think about the prospect of living on campus. Sharing spaces with peers. Like I told you, some of our residence halls are smaller and some of them are really big. You're sharing a lot of common space with other undergraduate students. It means you're sharing some of those common spaces like bathrooms or lounges or laundry rooms. Noting that really all of our students come from such wide backgrounds and routines, and it is really important to be respectful. That's what helps build a really strong community. And our residence halls are really full of opportunities to meet people. And equally important, it's those small acts of courtesy that become really important and make a strong community. Cleaning up after yourself and keeping noise down. Those are the types of things we expect from our residents to be good, respectful neighbors and good, respectful peers for everyone else in their residence hall. Um, so for those that do live in our residential communities, note that every student has a resident advisor. So again, another fellow student that's here to get to know you, lead communities. Again, growth of helpful to contribute to the growth of a helpful, healthy community. We also have staff that live in our residence hall, students that are diversity peer educators, really to help to assist in the development of a community that's really inclusive for students of all identities. And those are the student peers and the student leaders in the communities. We also have hall directors. They're full-time staff, people kind of like myself, that live in the residence halls and are here to support particular communities and lead the residential communities on a yearly basis. And then you may think to yourself, well, there's a lot of support, but there's opportunities for me to get involved. So the thing to note is that every residence hall community has a hall council. It's a part of our residence hall association as well as a multicultural council, and those councils are made up of students that live in your residence hall. Again, our hall councils plan things like hall events, community building. So do our multicultural councils. They really engage students in inclusive programming, creating that welcoming environment. And important to note, students can join these in the fall. You have an opportunity if you join the Michigan community and live on campus, you would have a chance to join and go for a seat in one of these communities and one of these councils. So I talked about living in a community. I talked about the housing options. Let's talk about meeting specialized needs. So We have additional living options available. Let's talk first about our health and disability needs. So students with disabilities, whether chronic or severe medical conditions, can request accommodations to help meet their individual housing needs. Students will engage in an interactive process with our Services for Students with Disabilities Office, SSD. So it's important that students would submit a request for a particular accommodation. Noting that an request for an accommodation does not guarantee you'll be approved for that. One thing I always like to note is sometimes students will ask, well, I really want to live with this specific person that I've met that I also know is coming to Michigan, but I also have this specific need. Like, which one gets prioritized? Which one becomes important? Or it becomes in this regard. Note that we work with the individual students and we approve things for the individual students. So your individual accommodation is always going to take priority over a roommate preference. We'll do everything we can to meet both if we can, if you know of a specific person you want to live with. But it's important to note that in meeting accommodation needs is really important for us, and that's going to really take precedence over all of our requests and are still really subject to availability. We need to be able to have the option available to assign you to. Let's talk less about help meeting religious needs. So again, what we really do within Michigan Housing is recognize and support students' observances of their own faiths and traditions while living on campus. Um, so again, students are required to complete a form that is available both linked in the housing application, or if you were to look up Michigan Housing and Religious Observance Form, you would find our form. Requests that are made at the time or by the time our housing application closes. Noting that submitting a request does not guarantee that students will receive their preferred room type or campus. And again, if it's in your first year living here at the University of Michigan Ann Arbor, it does not guarantee on-campus housing beyond that first year into your second or potentially third year here at Michigan. Um, Similarly to our health and disability accommodations, our focus is on you and your needs, and we'll do what we can to meet specific preferences for roommates. But again, your needs are going to come first for us. And then our last type of, I would call specialized need option on-campus housing is really working to provide gender inclusive housing for students that may need a supportive space, again, regardless of gender identity or gender expression. We have a couple of options. We have a gender inclusive rooms across campus, and we also have a gender inclusive living experience community in one of our residence halls. So similar to our religious observance requests, we require students submit those by the time our housing application closes, and I'll talk a little bit about that deadline here in a bit. But again, there's another form, and again, the same types of things with our religious observance needs. They don't guarantee housing beyond that first year here at Michigan. And again, those are really going to take precedent over specific needs that come up with the roommates, but we'll do what we can to meet both if we're able to. So let's talk about what it means to apply for housing. So first thing foremost, as much as I wish this weren't the case, we do sometimes hear from students in which they're confused about, again, where information is coming from. There are, again, sometimes some nefarious actors out there that will attempt to spoof or impersonate Michigan Housing. So I do want to talk to you all about how Michigan Housing will contact you and the things that we do and don't do when helping new students apply for on-campus housing. You will receive all of your emails about your housing application and contract from housing@umich.edu. That email address is important to note. That's where all of our messages come from. All of your actions, everything that you do, from applying to housing to signing a housing contract, is available in a dedicated portal, the Michigan Housing Portal. Here, you'll do all of those things. All housing payments in the end, the room and board charges, are put onto your student account, just like tuition and other fees are, and you make all of those payments through the university's Wolverine Access system. So just know that too. And if you're ever unsure, if you're not sure about things, looking for more information, go to our website, go to our knowledge base. They're both accessible at housing.umich.edu. And again, it's what's available to help you understand a little bit more about how housing works at Michigan and what's available and what we can do to help you out. So first step, applying for housing, is to submit the housing application. Our housing application opened a couple weeks ago. So it's been open for a little while. One requirement is that students obviously had to have matriculated. You have to have been paid your enrollment deposit in order to initially, at least to get messaging from Michigan Housing to invite you to apply. But in order to actually access your Michigan Housing portal, you have to have a U of M unique name and email address. That's the only way it's going to authenticate to who you are so that we know it's you that's applying for on-campus housing. So you have to have that unique name and email address. If you do claim that or set that up, usually it takes about another day or so. And then again, you'll be able to log into your housing portal. When you apply for housing, you'll have some important information provided to us, like your phone number, emergency contact, confidential missing person contact. You'll have an opportunity to indicate housing preferences, like which campus or what type of room you're interested in. I'll relay some of the information that I shared here is also in the housing application around how to request accommodations for health and disability or religious observance or gender-based needs. You'll complete a set of roommate matching questions. It is, I think, 16, 17, don't quote me, I think 16 questions that will ask you to, again, provide an answer for from among some options. Again, it's things like what time do you go to sleep and what time do you wake up? How do you feel about sharing items with roommates? Again, how do you feel about noise or how do you feel about guests in your room? So the types of things that, again, if we can again, do what we can to help you find someone else or again match you up with a roommate, if you end up sharing a bedroom or sharing a suite with someone, that helps you again maximize compatibility as much as possible. You can also request to live with another specific transfer student. So have the opportunity to search and find other students as transfer students as roommates. Again, we do what we can to pair up new transfer students together if we're able to, providing students that have the opportunity to be roommates and go through the same experience again, not being their first time in college, but being their first time at Michigan. There's again some bonding that happens over that experience. So we'd like transfer students to live together if we can. I will note if you know someone that is, again, whether they're a brand new first year student, they're already here at Michigan, you're welcome to reach out to us to ask to live with them. Again, it's going to depend on what's available. There's always possibilities. There's no guarantee, but we'll try if we're able to. So again, if there is someone, you're welcome to reach out to us. But by default, we push students to new transfer students to try to live with one another. And again, we'll do everything we can to honor that roommate preference. A couple things to note about roommates. So again, you have a couple of options. Like I said, every student when they go through the process will have to answer a set of roommate matching questions. Even if you already know who you want to live with, you're still going to have to answer the questions. And then kind of what happens from there depends on, well, do you know who you want to live with, or do you want to search for a roommate instead? One thing to note is you don't have to do any of this. You could just fill out the roommate matching questions and say, hey, Michigan Housing, just do it for me. Put me in a room. As long as you maximize my compatibility with my roommate, I'm fine with whoever you assign me to live with if I end up living in a space with a roommate. Um, but if you do want to search for someone who know you want to live with, you have a couple of options. If let's say you already know who you want to live with, kind of here on the right side, what you're going to do is you're going to form a roommate group. You're going to designate one person as your leader. That leader is going to create a group name and a password. It's important to note whoever creates that name and password, don't share that name and password with anybody outside of who you want to live with. Once you share that name and password with who you want to live with, they're going to request to join that group by entering the name and the password. And then the leader of the group is going to accept folks one by one until everyone's in the group, and then you're all set. If you don't know who you want to live with and you want to search for a roommate, you can search for roommates through the housing application. In the portal there, you can filter and search on criteria, show me all the people that, again, also really like their room cold. That's what I'm going to search for because those are the people that I really want to live with. You can find students in there, and then you can message them through the portal, and then eventually request to form a roommate group with them. Whoever sends the request becomes the leader of the group, and then again, you have an opportunity to accept or decline the invite. And once you accept, you're in the group and you're all set. So again, also note you're not required to form a roommate group, but it is an option available to students that are interested in applying. Once you apply, after you've submitted, one thing I also note here is our housing application process is not first come, first serve. There's no incentive to be the first person to apply, or if you've already applied. What we do is we ask all students to apply by the deadline, so that we can give everyone an opportunity, no matter when they commit to the university, to find roommates and apply for housing and be thoughtful about their on-campus housing application. So once you do submit, if you submit by our deadline, which is Monday, May 11th at 11:59 p.m., you can go back in and edit more information. So let's say you need some more time to find roommates. You have an opportunity to do more of that. Or if you want to change a preference within the application, you're welcome to do so. You can go back in and edit that information, with the exception of any applications for the Michigan Learning Communities or the One Theme Community or Transfer Your Experience. In order to provide the opportunity for those programs to review applications, you won't be able to go back in and edit essay questions or answers or preferences after you submitted. So just know that. But otherwise, we ask students complete our housing application by May 11th. If you either haven't started it or started it but haven't completed that, we're going to bug you a couple times over the next few weeks to make sure you get it in by May 11th so that we can work on starting to assign students. And then, like I said, that's what happens next. Once you apply, you're in good shape. There's really not much you need to do because then what we're going to do is we're going to work to start to assign you to a room based on what's available and what preferences you put in your housing application. What will happen then is after that, you'll eventually get a room assignment and you'll have an opportunity to sign a housing contract for that space that we assign you to. We expect that's going to happen this year. It would be thus assigning you and then communicating to you what that assignment is in early to mid-June. So a couple weeks after the housing application closes. So again, if you apply right now, again, give it, might be about 6 weeks or so. You may not hear from us, but just know that's because our plan is to communicate out housing assignments and give you a chance to sign that contract in early to mid-June. And that is a required last step. Like I said earlier, right at the start, no one is required to live on campus, and there's no commitment until you sign that housing contract, but you do have to sign it. So when we send it to you, you'd be on the lookout for a message that tells you your housing contract is ready for you. You have an opportunity to go see what that space is, have a few days to again mull it over and decide for yourself if you'd like to, and then signing that really locks you in and you're all set. And that's the last step to confirm your on-campus housing. However, before we can offer you that housing contract, one very important step, if you want to live on campus, you are required to adhere to our vaccination requirement. One thing I do want to note, and I'll read it here verbatim, is that all University of Michigan students residing in Michigan housing are required to submit their vaccination records. And again, I have the list of the 6 records that are required. One thing I do want to note here is that the requirement is to submit existing vaccination records. I hear questions from students all the time that will say, well, I haven't gotten this particular vaccine. Is that going to stop me? Well, our requirement is that you submit the records that you have or an attestation that you may not have a particular vaccine. That's what meets the requirement. You don't have to wait until you have all of the vaccines in order to get a housing contract or apply. While certainly the university does very strongly recommend vaccination against all of these potential diseases, what we really strongly encourage you to do is submit the vaccination records that you have. Like I said, we won't be able to offer you a housing contract and share what that assignment is until you get that submitted. The good news is that you can do that today. You can do that before you apply for housing or while you are or afterwards and those weeks in between when our deadline and when we give you a housing contract, you have time. I know going out and looking for and identifying vaccination records can take time. You may need to talk to families or families here. You may need to go look for your records for your students. So we give you that time, but it is a requirement. You do have to share with us the vaccination records that you have. I will note you probably have gotten messages about this. There's a dedicated portal for the university called VaxViewer, in which that's where you submit those vaccination records to that. And once you do that, you've really met that requirement for Michigan. Those vaccinations then records are then kind of reviewed and approved for the submissions. So also just know that there's a process there too. But again, tied in, but also a little bit independent from for on-campus housing. But again, as a requirement for every student before Michigan Housing can offer you a contract. So the last big thing I wanted to share, if you do end up living on campus, which again, we would love to have you if you're interested, is I also wanted to preview a little bit about moving. Looking ahead, if you're already thinking about, my gosh, what would travel look like? What would it be like to join and live on campus? Wanted to help visualize what this would look like in August. So the first day of classes in the fall, if you're joining us in the fall, is Monday, August 31st. So just know that too. And then the days prior to that are opportunities for move-in. So we do have some early move-in dates from August 22nd to August 25th. Those are opportunities for students that participate in brand new programs. We do have transfer students every year that join and participate in these programs. It's an opportunity to move in early. You get settled. There's things happening well before classes start. One of those early move-in programs is our welcome team. Those are student volunteers that work with Michigan Housing and assist peers with move-in. You have an opportunity to move in early, get acclimated, meet other peers and new friends. We would welcome any new transfer student that wants to live on campus and have an opportunity to move in early that weekend of August 22nd and 23rd. But if not, we do have just generic move-in days available for new transfer students living on campus. Once you sign that housing contract again in June, you'll then be able to go in and choose a move-in date and time from what's available. So again, across these days, some dates do have a little bit more limited availability, just so we can limit move-in traffic from vehicles and people on on the sidewalks and on the streets, just to make sure everyone has a really great move-in. So, like I said, looking forward to dates. If you're looking ahead to what August would like to live on campus, these are really the dates available as we look ahead to move in. So with that, happy to take questions. There are a couple in here right now that I want to go ahead and start to answer, but also happy to take others. So there were two questions in here around our Transfer Year Experience community. Someone asked, do you need to apply/write an essay for the Transfer Year Experience? Yes, there are essay questions for Transfer Year Experience. You'll find them in your housing applications. And again, you can start to write those essays right now, and then submit those as a part of your housing application. And someone asked, for the Transfer Year Experience, are there singles offered? Yes, Stockwell Hall and the floor that the Transfer Year Experience does have some doubles and some singles. Those are primarily, so there are opportunities to have both for those that are in that community. Someone also asked, generally, how competitive is it to get a single room? It depends. There are some we probably gear more singles towards new transfer students than we may to other communities. But we have a mix. Like I shared there earlier, singles are not the most prevalent room type across campus. But you are welcome to preference that in your housing application if you would really like to. So that's a really question around, is there an option for year-round on-campus housing? Yes, we do have options for students who do need to live on campus year-round. It may require you to move between terms, but we do have housing available between May and August. So we call our spring and summer terms. We do have on-campus housing. And then we do offer some opportunities for kind of what we would call term break. So between our fall and winter terms, kind of that mid-December to early January period for someone that needs to be here, there are options available there as well. Let's see what other questions we got. Someone asked you a question around, hi, how can someone become an RA? That's a really great question. How that works is usually around early to middle of the fall semester, we'll have applications open for people to join to become a resident advisor for the upcoming year. So encourage students, especially those that live on campus, to be on the lookout for that information coming out in the middle of the fall semester to look ahead for the upcoming academic year. Okay, let's see what else. We guys are a great question. Someone asked, is it possible to request a specific building, such as North Quad? We don't permit students to request specific buildings, but will be able to preference a campus and a type of room. And again, that's just because there's only so much available. Like I said, only so much space in some buildings, so we don't want to set an expectation of everybody preferencing the same type of community, and we don't necessarily always have space for that. So we just give you a chance to preference what campus and what type of room overall, but not necessarily a specific building. Someone asked, what are the differences between suites and for others? What I will say overall in our housing prices is usually the bigger the space and the less people living in it and the more amenities in it, usually a little bit of the higher cost. So it's something to be aware of. If someone was really looking for what might be the most cost-effective option, we have rooms like triples in some of our buildings, like Fletcher Hall, that are really priced at the lowest rate for those that really want that. But we have others like suites in which, if you shared a bedroom with someone else and you had a bathroom in the unit, that might be a slightly higher cost overall. And that's why we let you preference the types of rooms in your housing application, so you are in control of kind of telling us what's most important to you. A couple of folks have asked questions around, accessing the application. How do you apply? What happens is once you have your University of Michigan unique name and you have that email address, like you could log into your Michigan email. What'll happen is, again, you would have gotten a message from us, again, whether you have it, whether it's to your Michigan or to your personal email, to links you to the Michigan Housing Portal. I will say, if you're not quite sure, just go to the Michigan Housing website. You'll find a link to the Housing Portal. You'll have to log in with your Michigan unique name and password. But once you do that, in the portal itself, you'll see some information about undergraduate student housing applications, and you're going to apply for the academic year. Academic year 2026, 2027. That's what gets you fall and winter term housing for the upcoming year. Okay, great questions that we have. Someone asked a question. How do you know if and when you're approved for the transfer year experience? Yeah, you'll get a message, again, not too long after the housing application closes. So sometime in like mid to late May, you get a message that says you've been approved for the transfer year experience, and then you'd just be on the lookout for a housing contract from us to live in those communities. Um, Someone asked, did I understand correctly that we don't necessarily have to have all vaccinations done before uploading our records? That is correct. Again, our requirement is that you submit the vaccination records that you have, or again, a test that maybe you don't have records for specific vaccines that we look for. Um, Someone asks, if you're moving in from out of state, can you have stuff sent ahead to your room? Yes. What will happen is if you sign a housing contract, we will send information to you looking ahead to move in with information about two particular companies that we work with. They're our preferred shipping partners that you can ship things to them, and we facilitate them to drop things off in your room before you move in. So you could ship things ahead, and when you move in, the things will already be in your room when you get here. Um, Someone asked if I submit my application on time, will I 100% get housing? So here at the University of Michigan, we don't guarantee housing for any student, any undergraduate student. But like I said at the top, we believe we're going to have housing for every new student that applies, this new transfer student that applies. So again, while I can't fully guarantee anything, we are going to have housing for you if you apply by that May 11th deadline. So I really encourage you to do so because we will have space for you somewhere. Um, So a couple folks have asked a little bit about like what costs look like overall. What I will say is I really encourage you to go to the Michigan Housing website. I will actually drop it in the chat here to do so. And what you'll actually see in here is a message that will send you to a link that could actually you could find that would actually show you our housing rates. It'll actually show you a little bit about the differences of some of those prices. Could really again share with you and show you what the differences in those costs are. I really encourage you to review those. We do have a little bit of variation based on types of rooms, so I encourage you to kind of think about what those may be. And again, folks have kind of asked like what kind of rooms are mainly set aside for transfer students. Like I said, we're typically looking, there's some variation of doubles. Like I said, there are some singles. There are a number of suites where you might have like a double bedroom in a suite with other people. So you may share a suite with four people, but you'd have a bathroom room and some common space. So there's opportunities there too. Some student asked like what campus would you recommend for a computer science student, North or Central? That's a little bit up to you. I think you encourage you to do your research. There are some of our colleges and schools and majors that are a little bit more oriented towards North Campus versus Central, but I encourage you to do a little bit of your research about where those departments are and where classes may be determined. I will say, no matter what campus you live on, there is bus service, but that goes pretty reliably between the two campuses. So you ended up living on a campus in which you're taking class on another. There's definitely going to be a reliable bus and transportation service that the university runs to get between the campuses. Someone asked, can you explain the meal plan options a little bit more? Um, how our meal plans work here is there are, in essence, three residential meal plans you can choose from. They are all versions of an unlimited plan, so they all provide for unlimited swipes at our dining halls. And the differences between the three are really how many more additional dining dollars you want to add on top of that to use at like a retail location or another spot around campus that accepts those dining dollars, but they all provide for some level of unlimited swipes at our residential dining halls. So it asks, even if the application and contract go through, are you not able to move on to campus until you get the vaccinations listed? No, also not a requirement. Again, the only requirement for Michigan housing is that you submit the vaccination records. So you're not going to be stopped from moving in if you haven't actually gotten vaccinated, as long as you tell us what vaccines you have, and again, attest to those that you don't have. Once you sign a housing contract, that is the step. Michigan housing won't prevent you from moving onto campus. Someone asked, are housing applications reviewed on a first come, first served basis? Like I said, no, we really gather them all up through May 11th to understand our full transfer student population that applies for on-campus housing. So like I said, there's no incentive to apply in early. We just want you to get it in by that May 11th deadline. A couple folks asked a little bit about the shipping companies. And again, like I said, when we would send you move-in information, so we're talking sometime in July, we'll send you information if you wanted to ship things ahead, how to ship to those companies and who they are. But again, nothing you would necessarily need to do before we would send you that information in July. There may be a couple other questions. I'm going to scroll back up and just make sure I would see. Oh, a couple folks have asked a little bit about kind of cooking and what cooking looks like. There was a good question in here. All of our residence halls do have community kitchens. So our community kitchen is available for those that do want to cook for themselves. And again, we have a good number of residential dining halls too, so it's not a requirement, but there are community kitchens in all of our residence halls. So someone asked a great question. You know, there's actually were a couple of communities, Michigan learning communities that I forgot to list here. There's one of them in particular. Someone asked around what is called our Global Scholars Program. That is actually an opportunity available for new transfer students. You don't apply to it in the housing application, but it is a community available at North Quad. So again, if you are admitted to that, you would have an opportunity to live on campus there. Someone asked, is it normal for sophomore transfers to room with incoming freshmen? Not really. It can happen on a rare occasion if there's really nothing else left, but we believe there'll be enough space this year that we'll primarily be placing transfer students with other transfer students, or in a special circumstance, maybe with another older returning undergraduate student who's a sophomore or older. But no, generally no, we don't place incoming transfer students with new first year students. And someone asked if I'm a fall transfer student, do I apply to the fall and winter housing application? Yes, that is the housing application available if you wanted to move in and join the university starting in August. Last thing I will note, and just make sure as I use time wisely, if you do have other questions or you feel like, hey, there's a specific need that I may have that I would like a specific answer, I really encourage you to reach out to us via email. I'll drop again the email address in here. It's pretty similar to our website, housing. It's housing@umich.edu. Strongly encourage you to reach out to us via email. We'd be more than happy to answer your questions. And like I said, again, if there's any advice you all may need or any questions as you go along to apply for on-campus housing, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'd be happy to help you. Otherwise, like I said, I'll plan to stick around for a little bit more. Um, Again, for any other questions, if you all feel like questions have been answered, you're welcome to hop off. Otherwise, I'll keep answering if there's any others that come in. Like I said, otherwise, I really appreciate you all finding time to join tonight. Thank you so much. This recording will be posted, like I said, probably sometime next week to the Michigan Housing website, to our housing application page. So you can look for that if you needed to find it again. But thank you otherwise. So if you asked about kind of the housing portal allowing us to log in, yeah, if you claimed your unique name today, wait again until tomorrow to try to log in there. It does take about 24 hours, usually the next day to log in. I thought it was a really good question around payment timeline. Thanks for just asked that. Housing costs, room and board costs are due the first day of fall classes for those that are starting in the fall. So again, there's no requirement to pay ahead of time there too. Someone asked, is there any difference between student and family housing? I'll say if there's any new transfer students that have families with them and need to live on campus, please reach out to us via email. We have some specialized needs that we meet in those rare circumstances, so encourage you to reach out to us via email if you have a question about that. Someone asked, could someone request to room with a freshman roommate as an incoming sophomore? Is that not allowed? That is allowed. Yeah, we could do that. I encourage you to email us. In particular, you won't be able to form a roommate group with a brand new first year student, but you can email us to ask that, and we'll see if we're able to accommodate that based on, again, the timeline that new first year students are also applying for housing. So when asked if I'm a fall student and I apply for fall and winter application, does my lease end when I leave Michigan in December? I will say how this works is our residence halls do close in December, so students are required to leave, not necessarily move out, but leave. You can leave items in rooms. And then we reopen again in January at the start of the winter term. Someone's graduating in December, of course, you can cancel your housing contract and depart and move out then. But otherwise, their housing contracts are really from August all the way through May. So I asked, do I have to commit to the university before being able to apply for on-campus housing? Yes. Students do have to have committed to the university, have a Michigan email address and a unique name, had to have paid an enrollment deposit, or had to have that deposit fee waiver process in order to apply for on-campus housing. So as if I'm from Puerto Rico, do shipping companies also allow me to ship my stuff from Puerto Rico? That is actually a question. I'm not sure I know the answer to that. That might be based on our particular shipping companies. I might encourage you to do a little bit of research for like Michigan Housing, Shipping, and Storage. You'll find the information for the two companies that we have. They may have opportunities to ship things from Puerto Rico, but that would really be up to the shipping companies there if they would accept those from there. And a really great class selection for transfer students only living on campus in the fall semester would be required to make a payment for the entire academic year on the first day of the fall. That's actually a really great question. We bill room and board by semester. So your fall semester room and board would be billed to your account to be due the first day of classes, but nothing for the winter term. If you were living on campus for the winter, would be billed until like November into December. So you'd have time there. So if you're only ever going to live on campus for the fall, it would only be billed for just the fall semester. Someone asked if we're a group of exchange students, hey, people, could we all ask to be in the same building in double rooms? Oh, that's very interesting. I would encourage you all, if you would like to live in the same building, maybe to coordinate filling out your housing applications in such a way. That would be the case. Form your roommate groups to live maybe among the pairs that you may want to. That would definitely maximize your chances. I can't guarantee that, but there are ways you can apply for on-campus housing there. If you're not quite sure exactly what to do, would encourage you to reach out to us via email. We might be able to advise on the best way to apply for housing in such a way. They're really great questions. Thank you all for asking this. I'm going to just do another scroll through to make sure I haven't missed anything. Someone I did miss a question about 10 minutes ago about how far the campuses are from each other. Are you able to walk? You could walk if you want to. I've done it a couple of times. It is a bit of a longer walk between North and Central Campus. I would say the overwhelming majority of students will take one of the buses between. But if you really wanted to walk, you could. It would definitely take you at least a half an hour between to walk from like at least the edge of one campus to another, if not longer. So would highly encourage using our university transportation to go between the campuses. Like I said, it's about a 10 to 15-minute bus ride between them. All right. I'm going to give it about 1 more minute for any further questions. Otherwise, like I said, if you feel like I've answered the questions and you don't have anything further, you're welcome to hop off. Like I said, really appreciate everyone's time and joining the webinar tonight. And look forward, hopefully, to applying for housing or living on campus next year, or if not, just joining the Michigan community this upcoming year.